Hello everyone, it's Demetrius Villa from the High Speed Rail America Club. You're just about to join me in for a special interview with Texas Central Railway President, Judge Robert Eckels. Hello, Your Honor?
Robert is fine.
Oh, Robert. Okay, so we'll call you Robert then, all right?
That's fine. Whatever is easy for you.
All right, perfect. How you doing over there?
Very good. Working off a cell phone. I'm not in my office. I'm close the door here. I'm at one of our engineering firms, but it seems to be working okay. I just use my cell phone. It seems to be fine. So they got a picture. They got a picture on the wall. We're okay.
Yeah, I see. We can hear you loud and clear. All right, perfect. So you ready to begin?
Sure.
All right, excellent. So I wanted to hear, what was your inspiration that got you in creating Texas Central Railway, and when was it that you started, and why Texas?
You know, I was the county judge here in Houston, was part of the county judge around the country. It would be more like county executive or county mayor, perhaps. It's the chair of the county commission, or in California, it would be the board of supervisors, chair of the board of supervisors. So I have been in Texas. Before that, I was in the legislature, and we had worked on the high-speed rail project, the old Texas Triangle project in the early 90s. That project had collapsed because of lack of funding and opposition from Southwest Airlines and rural communities. And so we had, kind of put it on the back burner, but I had gone around and continued to look at ways we could better connect the big mega centers of Texas, Houston and the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then also Austin and San Antonio. They're smaller, but they're still pretty big and dynamic parts of the state. And it links the areas in between, particularly Texas A&M University, Bryan College Station area in between Houston, Dallas, and Austin and San Antonio. So we had been working on that, on how to connect folks more closely together. The reason this project wound up in Texas, and the frustration and challenge we had, was that you see that same frustration you see around the country trying to get public support, political support for a train. And in Texas, you can get support largely for urban congestion relief, but it's difficult to look at intercity travel. And you wind up having to put together political constituencies that make for a train that is much more expensive, perhaps, than it needs to be.
Yeah, especially now since I think Dallas has opened up their DART line also too now within the cities.
Yeah, DART has the largest light rail line in the country, over 80 miles of light rail traffic linking DART with the inner city area near where our station will be. Houston has a smaller light rail, but a pretty well-developed bus and transit system, and is building towards a expanded light rail and also what's called a bus rapid transit to link an area near where we'll wind up with the station probably, and connectivity into the city. But fundamentally, what brought us to Texas was a study that was done by a group called U.S.-Japan High-Speed Rail that looked at the United States and city pairs in North America. They looked at U.S. and Canada. And while you have more traffic on the East Coast, you also have 9 states and legacy carriers up in the Northeast quarter. California has a political process and a system that is different, very different than what we're doing in Texas. It's just a different way they pursued it, as many publicly sponsored projects might be. But Texas, with a single state, large population, close to 7 million in Houston, 7 million in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a growing corridor in between, and a rapid population growth, a generally business-friendly kind of environment, made sense as the most innately financeable corridor, if you will, not the most revenue and the most ridership, but the most financeable because of the relatively flat, easy construction, low cost of construction. There's not a lot of bridges and tunnels, valleys to go across, and again, big population centers on both ends. So you get a lot of two-way traffic, not just a single traffic going and coming from a big city, maybe as you would in a St. Louis, Chicago kind of run or something. So it's it was a unique proposition in Texas, and you've got the capacity in the future to connect in Austin and San Antonio pretty economically.
Yeah. And especially, going into the geography of Texas, since it's relatively flat, it's a lot easier to make it rather than, in Japan where there's a lot of mountains and stuff like that.
Sure. Sure. Japan, Taiwan, it's all tunnels and viaducts. And we'll have viaducts, and most of our track will be, if not elevated, it'll be in viaducts or on a embankment kind of structure that will allow trains and cars and animals and wildlife and highways all to connect underneath without us blocking that traffic. So we've got the elevation issue, but not like you've got in other parts of the world where you're building, we'll be 18 or 20 feet in the air, not hundreds of feet trying to go through massive valleys.
Right. And how was your experience riding on the Japanese Shinkansen?
It's a very cool train. We've been all over the world. Prior to joining this company, I chaired a group that was a nonprofit, local governments coming together to try to encourage folks to come to Texas. And we've been to France and Germany, Spain, Taiwan, China, all over the world. Korea has a pretty cool system, riding all these trains and talking to folks about deploying their technology in the United States. But the fact is that most of them are used to dealing with a government sponsor, and they wanted government guarantees. As you've seen in Florida and Texas, Wisconsin, other parts of the United States, there's a resistance to government guarantees, political resistance. Like they barely passed the referendum in California. And so we were trying to promote this as a private project. The Japanese looked at this and said, we think that makes sense. And so they finally came on board and bid, if you will. It's a really cool train, very smooth. It's a little bigger than the European models, just a little wider because it's not on a legacy system. And fundamentally, they're different than the Europeans or the Americans in that they don't mix the traffic, where we've recently had some accidents here on the conventional rail. Occasionally, you'll see, like in Spain, the train running off the track, they hit it too fast, or in France, you'll see a TGV train having a wreck with a truck or some such. That doesn't happen on the high-speed tracks there, but they take the high-speed trains off and run them on the conventional rail tracks. The Japanese don't do that, so they've got the safest train in the world, so you feel very comfortable riding their train. They've never had an accident in 50 years that's resulted in a loss of life. They don't have derailments, even in the Fukushima earthquake they had that was so serious in Japan recently. They didn't have derailments of their trains. It's a very safe system, and they have that automatic train control that makes sure the driver's not going too fast into a station, or if someone by some chance got into the driver's compartment and tried to take over a train, they just shut them off. So it's a very safe system and a very fast and smooth system.
Yeah, they're extremely punctual too.
They've got a 39-second, I think, is their average delay with close to 400,000 people a year. They run a train, I believe, about every 4 minutes out of Tokyo Station going towards Nagoya and Osaka on the system that we run, that we will be running in Texas.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got into the safety of it also too, because a lot of people have been, when we talk to them about high-speed rail, when we say, oh, the trains are going to go faster, they think they're going to derail faster or something like that. And it's absolutely not, especially with the Japanese system, which they've been engineering it for 50 years. Like you said, they've never had an accident before.
No, it's the safest train, and not just the safest train, but the safest transportation system in the world. Exponentially safer than driving in a car between Houston and Dallas on Interstate 45 or up any freeway on the East Coast somewhere.
Absolutely. And what role would CaHSRA partake in during the creation and operation of Texas Central Railway? Because I know they're a private company.
Yeah, Japan Central Railways has been a system integrator. It's their technology. They don't really build the train, but they own the intellectual property rights to the train. And so they're the system integrator. They are very sensitive to the fact that we would deploy the train and have the same kind of safety record here that they have in Japan. And so they'll be involved in helping us with the life of system. They don't want to be the operator here. They want to have their own operator or our own operator. They want us to create our own operator here in the United States. And they want to be a part of that as much as anything to support the system and make sure it's operated as they would like to see it done. I'll give you a great example, probably a difference is in their system and any others, just for the drivers. When you walk in the door, the driver walks in the door of their training, or their dispatch facility there, their station in Tokyo. The first thing the driver does is blows a breathalyzer test, and it's not is it below 0.01 or 0.08, is there any alcohol? If there's any alcohol, they don't drive. And so that whole concept of accountability and responsibility and safety permeates their system. They want to make sure that here we operate our system the same way and that it is as safe as it is there. So they're going to provide a life of system service agreement with us, but they want us to build in the United States our own capacity to be an operator and run the train. So they want to train our people to do it the Japanese way, but in an American company.
Absolutely, and I think that's the best way of adapting it toward an American sort of way, as to not, because I mean whatever works for Japan works for Japan, but whatever works for America, is different also too as well.
Sure, we need to be able to wear cowboy hats here and flip flops in Miami when we're running on the train.
Yeah. All right. So do you think your project could be one of those moments where we look back on history as the next spark in innovation for this country?
I don't know. We've got a lot of sparks of innovation, but it will certainly be a transformational technology. I think when people see this train deployed, I believe we'll be the first ones in America, probably in the whole Western Hemisphere, the first true high-speed rail that will be deployed and operational. And when people see this, they're going to want to figure out how to have this system or something similar. And it could be the TGV or the ICE or the Talago Ave system or the Koreans KTX. It could be something else, the Chinese system. People are going to want to see this technology, though, deployed at their home once they see it operating here, and that it can be done in an efficient and fiscally responsible manner.
Right. Okay. We've asked some representatives from Spirit Airlines last week, a couple weeks ago at the eMerge conference here in Miami. I was able to ask the CEO of Spirit Airlines how they would feel about HSR, and none of them are entirely happy about it whatsoever, and they're ready to fight back. What is your response to that?
We had that same experience back in the 90s. In our case, when we've talked, I've not had any discussions with Spirit. We have spent a lot of time with American Airlines, United Airlines, Southwest Airlines. They've all been neutral to the project or no position at all, as long as we're privately financed. For most of the airlines, and I think for the transportation in general, we're just another transportation alternative. Spirit and Southwest do operate on a short haul model, but they make a lot more money on a little longer run than we're talking about. Our train will be typically for an airline about an hour gate to gate. We'll be 90 minutes or less, but we won't have the TSA kind of security, and we'll be much more centrally located, more easy access to the inner city than the airlines. So I just think we're going to be another transportation alternative. There's not enough planes to carry the number of people you'd have to have thousands of airplanes a day to carry the capacity of high-speed rail over time. This is not a technology for today. This is a technology for 100 years. And so if you start looking at the volume of people that can travel on this train, there's 400,000 people a day just about that run on this train between Tokyo and Nagoya every day in our system. We'll only have tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but with an average airplane carrying between 150 and 200 passengers, it's going to be, or even a little bit less perhaps. There's not enough planes you can put in the air to carry what this train will do as the state grows. So there's going to be a place for all of us in the future for Texas and for America.
Yeah, I remember there was a Top Gear episode when they were doing about, or not Top Gear, I know it was one of the three guys who was in Top Gear, where they went to Japan and they said that in order to move that many amount of people on the Tokaido line, they would have to have 3 jumbo jets leaving every 5 minutes or something like that out of Tokyo. And that's, incredible that a system like that, what we thought is like, oh, trains are old, but they updated the system to, for modern day and even, as you said, for 100 years.
Yeah, this is the Takata Shinkansen, but it'll just be deployed in Texas. It'll be the Texas Shinkansen.
All right. Well, some would argue that a private company will not be able to fund the large amount of money needed for this sort of project or to hire the right contractors. Why should a private enterprise run rail?
Well, I think 2 reasons. One is it's a long-term investment in infrastructure, and infrastructure provides an attractive investment. It provides both a long-term revenue stream, capital gains over a long period of time, and a hedge against inflation. As values go up, the value of infrastructure typically goes up. So yes, we have been able to attract the private investment to make this work. Often railroads, particularly high-speed railroads, and even more so probably commuter and passenger rail, have not been successful because they've had to serve political constituencies. We are different. Well, we have a political influence on us. We're heavily regulated by both the federal and state governments. We are able to go where the market will drive us. We have that market discipline constraining our ability to move the train to certain destinations. And so we go to downtown Dallas, the inner city. We go to the inner city of Houston. We'll have a stop in between and can add stops in between. And and provide some of that social services, if you will, you're seeing California doing out in the Central Valley. We can do that between Houston and Dallas, but we do it at a very nominal cost. If you looked at a statewide political system, we, like California, would be much more expensive, and it would be very difficult to put together the private financing to make it work. So by having that market discipline, controlling our costs, by not being constrained by the government procurement process, and having been in government for many years, we bought a lot of infrastructure, whether it's tollways or freeways or flood control improvements, those kinds of things. And it's expensive at the government to do work, and it's necessarily so because you're protecting the public dollars. You want to have full transparency in the process, but it makes it harder to negotiate a better price on products and services. And in fact, we can negotiate. We have the biggest infrastructure construction consortiums in the world working with us on this train, and we think we're going to have a great project that we will deliver much more quickly without having to go to the taxpayers for government grants or subsidies.
Absolutely. And some people have said that there's no train that makes a profit, or there's no train that's not government run, and that, quite frankly, that's not true, right?
Right. Well, the train that the most recent Reason Foundation report talks about two that are actually profitable: the Paris-Lyon run from TGV, and the Tokyo to Nagoya, the Tokaido Shinkansen that you just mentioned. The Tokaido Shinkansen is the company that we're working with. So we know the people that know how to make this work. They're working with us on this project. And again, there's lots of people that say you can't do it. My answer is, well, what if it works? Yeah, we think it will. We're excited about it.
No, we definitely know for sure it very well will once it starts moving up. But there's some people who don't, want it to go, and we've had our fair share over here at with All Aboard Florida. There's a lot of opposition groups, even in California also too, that are against these sort of projects, mainly because either they'll say property values will decrease or other reasons. What is your reaction to those opposition groups?
We have that same kind of challenge here, particularly with the folks in rural Texas who they don't see the benefit. The Houston area, the Dallas area really likes it. In the rural counties where we talk about a station, there's a divide. There's some people that are really excited about the prospect of having a train that would come through and stop in their community and let them be, 20 or 30 minutes from the Galleria or the Texas Medical Center, or an hour maybe from Dallas. So they get it. But for a lot of folks, they don't. And as you say, there's a lot of concerns that aren't real concerns: the safety issues, property values, the impact on agriculture. Around the world, that hasn't been the experience. And when we go in and talk to people, we can generally get them to be more supportive of the project, particularly when it's privately financed and they understand the taxpayer, that the taxpayers are not on the hook on this project. But there's always people who are opposed to anything. We call them people against virtually everything, the paid people. And we built a lot of highways in Texas, a lot of tollways, parks and things that have had to deal with property owners and folks who thought it was a horrible idea. And once they're in, they tend to not even think about what it was like before. They get used to it and understand that it's something that's good. So we're going to have to work through that. It involves a lot of community outreach. We understand really that the hardest part of this project is we can financially make people whole, but there is an emotional impact on folks whose property we go through, and we get that. We're trying to be sensitive to those issues and as fair to those people as we can be. And again, we can compensate a little more generously than the government can because it's not public money. But and there's ways we can accommodate relocation and interruption of their life for a period of time. But in the end, there is going to be some stress anytime you do something on this scale anywhere in America.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand where that's coming from, because over here at All Aboard Florida, the tracks already exist, so a lot of people are making a big stink over nothing. It's already there, but for you guys over in Texas, I mean, you guys have to build the whole entire infrastructure. This is not here.
Right. Even when we're running next to tracks, current tracks, we can't build. We've not found a way to build in the right of way now with the freight rail. And really, it's been the accidents you've seen in North Carolina and Canada, the crude oil trains and some of the other serious accidents, not the passenger accidents, but the freight accidents with hazardous cargoes, whether it's crude oil or some other kind of hazardous cargo. that makes it difficult to operate in really close proximity to those folks.
Yeah, so that's why you guys have chosen the utility line, correct?
Yes, we're running adjacent to a Union Pacific line, but it's between the UP and a major highway here in coming into the city of Houston. And then we turn north and run adjacent to a current high tension power line. We've tried to run as much as possible next to existing infrastructure just to have an impact on land that's already had an impact. We've tried to not do a new totally greenfield development somewhere.
Okay. And speaking to the millennials, especially like my generation and others around my age, is there anything you would want to say to them about this project?
You know, my daughter will be 20 in a couple of weeks. She's a freshman in college herself, so I guess she's kind of at the tail end of perhaps the millennial generation. We've talked about this train a lot. It's an exciting project, particularly when you look at the options it will provide. Right now, you're limited in your ability to connect people, but millennials, I think, understand as much as anyone else, or more so, the need to connect to people. And you've got a social infrastructure that can connect through a virtual social media, whether it's this YouTube or Skype or Facebook or LinkedIn or the various social media that's out there.
I mean, heck, we're using it right now.
We're using it right
now. I don't have to fly over there.
And the beauty of the train is if you're driving your car, you can't be doing what we're doing right now. If you're riding on an airplane, you can't do what we're doing right now. But on the train, you can. And you can connect with your friends, but you'll also be able to not have to drive. You'll not have to fight the traffic at the airport. You'll have a safe, reliable alternative that is much more civilized than what we have today. So I think that you know, the millennials and others will too find this to be an attractive transportation alternative. Excuse me. It's something that is just really exciting that their parents or grandparents may never have had an opportunity to experience here in the United States.
Right. What are your thoughts on All Aboard Florida and what they're doing over here down in Florida?
You know, it's been fun to watch the All Aboard Florida folks. We've talked to them. We've talked to the both the project management team and the folks at Fortress that are I guess the equity fund working on this, following the financing. I think it's great that you can take, especially having existing rights of way. There's a fascinating legacy to the Florida East Coast Railway and the kind of cutting edge technology that it was at the time. The vision of the founders of the railway as they tried to get it all the way down Florida into Key West. And you've got a little different financial model, but we're very excited about the project and the prospects for the project and the fact that it is, again, a strong private initiative showing that there is a way to make passenger rail that makes sense for the people of that local community.
All right. Thank you for the support. How would you compare and contrast Texas Central Railway to the California High-Speed Rail project?
You know, we're just different. We work closely with California on regulatory issues. They're a political project operated by the government to serve political constituencies, which drives up their cost. But they've got a vision, and their vision is much broader than ours. Theirs is a statewide vision linking Sacramento in with San Francisco, the Central Valley, LA, and San Diego. Ours is a much less ambitious, just linking Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth in a system that is designed to generate revenue to pay back investors. We don't have quite the broad social agenda that they've got in California. So we're just different. Theirs is, again, a much bigger and more ambitious project. And again, it's public as opposed to private. But we're both facing the same kind of regulatory issues with Federal Railroad Administration. So we work together to the extent that we do on those issues.
All right. And going back onto the political spectrum of it, because as you just mentioned, California is very much, turned into, a political sort of exercise. Do you see high-speed rail as a bipartisan issue and something that both sides of the political spectrum can agree on, both Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals?
Yeah, I think that there's something for a lot of folks in the system. The real challenge and the controversy around high-speed rail mostly comes from public support and how much taxpayer support you're going to put to the project. And every market is different. Again, in Texas, we do not have the public or political support to get a large taxpayer subsidy for operations or a grant to help us build the project. So we're not asking for those things. And there's a lot of support from the fiscally conservative Republicans who want to see industry. They like the project, particularly in those urban areas. And the Democrats who like tend to like I think Republicans breathe the air too. They're environmental. I'm
Yeah.
Republican. We like the air too. But the environmental groups tend to support us very strongly because it's a very clean technology. It's a quiet technology. It's an efficient technology. We have very strong bipartisan part in Austin legislature for this project today, and at the local level among the city and county officials. We also have bipartisan opposition from those rural areas. It's more of the closer you are to the track, the less you support the train. It's kind of like your support is inversely proportional to your proximity. Again, once the train gets built, they'll see, I think, that somewhere we build it, people will have a chance to look at it and see that it operates today in the most densely populated, heavily regulated environment in the world in Japan. And people live nearby very, very well and don't find the train disturbing at all. But until you get it in and people see it, they're just not going to believe that.
Right, and that's been a big problem here in the United States because we haven't been used to, high-speed rail for the past 50 years, not even mostly rail. It's all of a sudden now with the Amtrak accident, the people now want to speak about infrastructure, and it's very sad that, it hasn't taken accidents to get
Amtrak and the conventional rail systems are working towards ultimately having that positive train control in place that might have stopped the accident they recently had in Pennsylvania. In our system, if a train's driving too fast, the central office just shuts it down, and it happens automatically. You can't blow into a station at 200 miles an hour because the system will not allow it. And there's a driver, there's a control operator in the main control center, and there's a computer that's all three monitoring and providing checks. And so that kind of technology is coming to the conventional rail system. But in America, we tend to mix freight and passenger and higher speed passenger, various speeds together. It's just been slower getting that kind of safety technology and harder to put it in place in the American system.
Okay, and what other places in the United States do you think that can see this happening? And also, has CaHSRA expressed any interest in any of those places here in the United States?
They studied the country as a whole, looked again at 97 potential corridors and found this to be the most innately financeable. I'm sure they would have a greater interest in others down the line. You'll have to call them and ask them about it. I do think there's a natural link into Austin and San Antonio on the Interstate 35 corridor, coming off of our train or running a separate line down that corridor, tying Austin and San Antonio into Houston and Dallas. A potential link down into the lower Rio Grande Valley. Florida actually has an interesting kind of possibilities. You got the Florida East Coast Railroad moving. Miami north would be a kind of an interesting mix. There's some lines in the Midwest that they're being looked at. Of course, the East Coast is the one everybody looks to. It's just how do you get through the legacy carriers and the extremely high cost of right-of-way to truly upgrade from the Acela to a more European or Asian standard or Japanese speed rail.
Especially all the bridges and tunnels that have been there.
California's already got their project moving. And again, it will be a function of cost and how long it takes to build it. But there's places around the country that this could be attractive. And I'm sure that once it's in some place, folks will be trying to find it. But it will be different. Some markets, a big market like Houston and Dallas, we can do privately. You could probably do some of this privately up on the East Coast. You may be able to do it in Florida, where you're from. Other places, you'll have to have a public-private partnership. And then other places like California, they'll want to do it with more a stronger government lead. Although I know they're counting on at some point having some private investment as well.
With the length of the EIS study and the amount of politics, concern, and controversy surrounding all the high-speed rail projects, including yours, do you think the market may be too hostile for high-speed rail here in the United States?
No, I think there's a great market for high-speed rail. Again, hindsight being 2020, I wish we had spent a little more time on community outreach, being a private company, working with the folks along the route. We have had a strong pushback in the legislature from some of the rural areas. I don't see anything that is fatal coming through, but it has made it a little more complex. The environmental process it is what it is, and you have to deal with it. It's a permitting process. Same thing happens for pipelines or power lines or other kinds of roadways, other kinds of infrastructure. So we don't see any fatal flaws at this point in the process. And I think America will embrace high-speed rail as soon as they see it and get an opportunity to experience firsthand what it's really going to do for the communities that it serves.
All right. Well, let's hope so. Last question: Houston Texans or Dallas Cowboys?
I'm a Texans fan, and unless the Cowboys, if they're playing anybody but the Texans, we want them to win. But
Yeah.
what I joke with my friends in Dallas that they can come down here, and we talk more about baseball than football, and say you can get down here and watch baseball in air conditioned comfort the way it was meant to be watched in Houston. And they always laugh and tell me I can get back up there and watch the Rangers in the playoffs or something in October because we won't be doing it here. So yeah,
I'm a Giants fan myself, so anytime the Cowboys lose, I'm good.
well, I'd be rooting for the Cowboys over the Giants, but I'm a Texans guy down here. It's a hometown team.
All right, so Robert, we thank you so much for doing this interview, and we wish you the best of luck, and we'll do all we can over here at High Speed Rail America Club to support you, your project, and any future endeavors.
We appreciate you too, and keep up the good work, and good luck there in Florida.
All right, and as they say over there, y'all have a great day, right?
You too.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And if you enjoyed this interview and would like to see more from the High Speed Rail America Club, including news, interviews, and information about high speed rail in America, be sure to subscribe to us by clicking the little button right there in the corner. We'll see you soon.